Hi, this is the second part of our negative harmony class. In the last video, we learned how negative harmony works, and we saw that it is nothing more than intervallic inversion around a specific axis. In this video, we'll explore the mechanism a little further, and we'll look at ways to reharmonize using negative chords. I'm Pedro Dias, and if you're enjoying the videos, please subscribe and click on the notifications bell. One of the things we can do with intervallic inversion is to invert a whole section of music, or a whole piece, melody and harmony. In this case, it doesn't make much sense to call it negative, because this inversion can be done around any axis. And when everything is inverted, it is hard to recognize the original material, unlike the images you're seeing now. Unless perhaps when you know beforehand that it is inverted material and listen very carefully, or if the lyrics makes you recognize the original. There are many examples of inverted music on the internet. Steve Cruickshank's channel, for instance, has many versions of well-known tunes, from Beatles to John Williams. Listen to a small section of Somewhere Over the Rainbow inverted.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high.
And here a section of an interesting inverted Sibelius piece by Iina-Maaria Laaksamo.
Ja aamun kiuru kirkkaudessa soittaa, kuin itse taivahan kansi sois. Yön vallat aamun valkeus jo voittaa.
As we said before, intervallic inversion is nothing new in Western music. One very interesting example of the use of inversion as a variation device is in the 18th variation of Rhapsody on a Theme by Paganini, composed by Rachmaninoff and based on one of Paganini's caprices for solo violin. This is the beginning of the original theme. Rachmaninoff chose to begin with A flat instead of A as in the original. Therefore, the axis of inversion is between A and A flat. Around this axis, C maps into F, B maps into G flat, A into A flat again, and E into D flat. Now, G sharp and F sharp should map into A and B, but he chooses to break the rule and uses B flat and C. Then he's back with the E and A mapping into the right notes. Besides the breaking of the rule with those two notes, which he certainly did for harmonic reasons, the rhythm is quite different, as well as the tempo and the character. Classical Western music is full of compositions that use inversion as a variation or derivation device, be it strict or not. Let's go back to negative harmony and investigate a little more the relationships of inversion in triads and four-note chords. As we have seen, any major triads inverts to a minor triad, and the transposition is determined by which axis we use. Like the major triad, every asymmetrical structure turns into a different type of chord when inverted. The dominant chord inverts to a half-diminished chord, or a minor sixth chord, and the augmented major seventh chord is inverted into a minor chord with a major seventh. Symmetrical structures, in turn, naturally don't change chord types when inverted. They are the augmented triad, the diminished triad and diminished seventh chord, the minor seventh chord, and the dominant with diminished fifth. As we've seen, one of the features of negative harmony, at least as proposed by Jacob Collier, is the relationship between chords whose root notes are equidistant from the tonic and the circle of fifths. For instance, a G chord inverts into an F chord. Both are a fifth apart from C, but G is a fifth higher and F is a fifth lower than C. A major triad inverts onto a minor triad, G major and F minor are negatives of each other, as well as G minor and F major. D minor inverts into a B flat major and vice versa. And it is the same with each pair of triads in the diagram. The chords that are over the axis, C and F sharp, when inverted, have the same root. C major inverts into C minor and vice versa. F sharp major inverts onto F sharp minor and vice versa. Now let's take a look at 4-note chords. Chords that have a symmetric structure don't relate as the diagram shows. C major 7th, for instance, inverts onto A flat major 7th. As we have seen in last video, 4-note chords only relate to the diagram as long as we consider the inversion as an added 6th chord. For instance, we may regard the inversion of C major 7th not as an A flat major 7th, but as a C minor with an added minor 6th. Another example, G major 7th inverts into F minor with an added minor 6th. A C minor 7th inverts into an A minor 7th, that is, a C major with an added 6th. An A flat added 6th, for instance, inverts into an E minor 7th, and vice versa, as it happens with all other pairs of root notes in the diagram. A C dominant chord inverts onto an A half diminished chord, or a C minor 6th, and vice versa. An A7 inverts into an E flat minor 6th, and vice versa. This diagram doesn't work for chords that don't have a perfect fifth, with the exception of the half diminished, as we've seen. For instance, the negative of the C diminished 7th chord is D diminished 7th, or any other of its enharmonics. Another example, a C augmented with the major 7th inverts onto an A flat minor with major 7th. That is why the system is limited regarding the relationship between the chords in the cycle of fifths, at least if you keep the same axis all the time. It works best when the harmony is diatonic and composed of triads and 4-note chords. Let's see some examples. In the last video, we substituted this A minor 7th for its negative, with a good result. If we use an A7th instead of the A minor 7th, that is, a secondary dominant preparing the D minor, the negative chord would be E flat minor 6th. This chord is less traditional in its relationship to this melody. The melody has A and G and the chord B flat and G flat. But it somehow kind of works. And one thing that could explain this has to do with the octatonic scale, also known as diminished scale. Here we have the representation of the 0-1 octatonic scale and the E flat minor 6th chord. As you can see, the notes of the chord belong to the scale, as well as pitch classes A and G, which are the notes of the melody. That's why it kind of sounds like a diminished chord. Other substitution options for non-diatonic chords are found when we change the axis of inversion. A7, for instance, is a secondary dominant, and it temporarily tonicizes D minor. Therefore, we can use the axis of D to invert this A7. As we know, the axis of the key of D is on the midpoint between D and A. That means the axis goes between B and C, and between F and F sharp. Here we have the circle of fifths diagram with the pairs of roots in D, and at the right we have the pitch class space with the D axis. As we can see, A7 inverts into G minor 6th. So we can use G minor 6th in the place of A7. It sounds more conventional, right? Now let's go to measure 3. If we use a D flat 7, which is a sub 5, we have B minor 6th as its negative. There's some shock between the G and F in the melody and the G sharp and F sharp in the chord. Although unconventional, it also kind of works, probably because of the strong chromatic voice leading movements, B going to C and F sharp and G sharp going to G in the C chord. This B minor 6th could function in a more traditional way if the melody had other notes, E and or D for instance. Here we have a harmonization that combines the original and the negative chords. In measure 1, I used G minor sixth and A7, where there was only the A7. In measure 2, in the place of the D minor 7, I used B flat sixth and D minor 7. I did the same thing in measure 5, only with A7 coming before the G minor, and in measure 7, where I used D minor followed by its negative, and G7 followed by its negative. In the next part of the series, we will investigate more examples, including a very unorthodox way of reharmonizing. See you there.